It's 3 a.m., and you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Bad thoughts just keep spinning in your head. What if the car breaks down? Or the laptop dies? What if you lose your job and can't pay rent? What if the dog needs surgery and it drains your wallet? Does this sound familiar to you?
Stop for a second and read that last line again, because I'm about to tell you something that can change your life. Almost all of those midnight fears can be wiped out by a single number. That number isn't $1 million, and it isn't even 100,000. That number is $10,000. Yes, you read that right. $10,000. I've spent years trading in the stock market and doing business.
Watching how people think about money is basically my job. I promise you, there's real science and real logic behind this number, way more than you'd expect. Get ready, because this is going to surprise you. First, let's admit something. Most people think financial milestones like this are just random numbers rich people made up to make the rest of us feel bad. But that's not the truth at all. Let me paint you a picture of life without $10,000 saved. You're standing in the grocery store, doing math in your head, wondering if you should buy the name brand or the cheaper one that tastes like cardboard. Your friends invite you to dinner, and you make up an excuse. You can't admit that a $25 meal would wreck your entire week's budget. This is the real life of millions of people who spend every paycheck the moment it lands. For these people, every decision turns into a calculation, and every surprise expense feels like a small disaster. They spend all their energy protecting the little money they have and never get the chance to actually grow it. But here's where it gets interesting. The moment a person saves their first $10,000, something changes in their brain and their behavior. This change has nothing to do with spending habits, because most people never even touch that money. The first thing that changes is how that person sees risk. When you have zero savings, every decision feels dangerous. Taking a new job, moving to another city, even planning a vacation, all of it stresses you out because you know one wrong move could wreck you. But once you have $10,000 sitting in your account, those same decisions suddenly feel manageable. You're not going to quit your job tomorrow and become a professional beach volleyball player, but you might finally have the courage to ask for that raise you've wanted for months. You might invest in a course or a certification that can grow your career. This safety money doesn't make you reckless. It simply gives you permission to think beyond just surviving. Now stay with me, because the brain chemistry part is genuinely wild. Scientists found that when a person sees a 5-figure number in their bank account, their cortisol level, the stress hormone, actually drops. In other words, $10,000 doesn't just change your bank account. It changes how your entire body reacts to everyday problems. Think about the day your check engine light comes on. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, that little light feels like a countdown to disaster. You panic inside, wondering if you'll have to put it on a credit card or borrow money from your family. But if you have $10,000 saved, that same light becomes a minor annoyance. You're irritated, sure, but you're not panicking. And this small shift ripples through every part of your life. You sleep better, you're more productive at work, and you're more patient with your family and friends. But here's the most important part. In finance, this is called the emergency fund effect. And it's not really about emergencies. It's about the peace of mind that comes from knowing the money is sitting there. Most people who save $10,000 never actually spend it on an emergency. Instead, they use it to invest in education, to build the courage to start a business, or to move to a better city. Sometimes they simply free up the mental space to focus on growing their income because the survival panic is finally gone. There's also a kind of confidence that's hard to measure but impossible to ignore. When you know there's money sitting in your account,
You walk differently. You negotiate better because you're no longer desperate, and you're not afraid to walk away from a bad deal.
This confidence leads to better job opportunities and healthier relationships. Let me introduce you to two people, Ali and Celine. They work at the same company and they earn the same salary. But Ali has zero savings and Celine has $10,000 in the bank. When the same raise opportunity comes up, Ali stays silent out of fear because he can't afford to risk his job. Celine walks straight into her boss's office and asks for exactly what she wants without blinking.
The difference between them isn't talent, it's savings. $10,000 might sound impossible right now, especially if saving even $100 a month feels hard. But don't miss this truth. The hardest part isn't saving the money itself. The hardest part is learning to become a person who saves money. Most people treat saving like a temporary diet.
They cut back hard for a few months, then burn out and slide right back into their old habits. But the people who actually reach $10,000 don't see it as a sacrifice. They see it as becoming a different kind of person. And that shift changes every decision they make afterward. Once you start seeing yourself as someone who saves, you begin noticing savings opportunities you never noticed before. You get more creative about finding extra income, and you start thinking long-term instead of chasing instant gratification. Here's the good news. This process gets easier the further you go.
Saving your first $1,000 is genuinely painful, and it demands real lifestyle changes and constant willpower. But the second $1,000 is noticeably easier because you've already built the habit and the mindset. By the time you reach your fifth or $6,000, the whole thing starts to feel almost automatic. There's also a simple math truth behind all of this. $10,000 covers the vast majority of unexpected expenses that derail people financially. Car repairs, hospital bills, job loss, and family emergencies, most of these get solved with less than $10,000. So once you hit this number, you become almost immune to the disasters that keep most people trapped in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. But maybe the biggest shift is how you start to see money itself. Without savings, money feels like something that disappears forever the moment you spend it. But once you have $10,000 as a foundation, you start to see money as a tool that multiplies your options. This is exactly the point where people start getting curious about investing, side businesses, and passive income. Not because they suddenly became financial geniuses, but because their mind finally has room to think past just covering the basics. When rent isn't on your mind, you start researching retirement accounts. When groceries don't stress you out, you start looking into the stock market. I live in that world every single day, and the biggest difference I see isn't income level, it's mindset. Here's something that might surprise you. A person with $10,000 saved is actually closer to financial freedom than someone earning double their salary with zero savings. Why is that? Because the saver has learned the most important skill in building wealth. And that skill isn't earning money, it's keeping money. You know people who earn a huge salary but are somehow always broke. They drive nice cars, live in nice apartments, and pay $20 for a salad, but they have no savings at all. And you probably also know someone who earns $40,000 a year but has built real savings by being careful with their spending. The difference isn't income, it's mindset. Saving your first $10,000 is basically a masterclass in learning the right financial mindset.
You learn to separate what you want from what you need, and you learn to cut expenses without feeling deprived. Most importantly, you learn to delay gratification, which is probably the single most valuable financial skill a person can develop. Now, let's look at what $10,000 actually does for you in real life. First, car repairs, most of which cost between $500 and $3,000. With $10,000, a car issue stops being a disaster and becomes a minor inconvenience.
medical costs also become manageable. Even without great insurance, most urgent care visits or small procedures fall within this range. You won't cover major surgery with this amount, but you'll handle most unexpected health issues just fine. Job loss is probably the scariest scenario for most people. But $10,000 turns it into something you can actually survive. Depending on your expenses, it buys you 3 to 6 months of breathing room. That means you don't have to desperately grab the first job offer that comes along. You can actually be selective. Now, I'm going to show you the biggest mistake people make. But first, you need to know this. $10,000 doesn't just protect you from disasters, it also opens doors that simply wouldn't exist otherwise. Say you hear about a certification program that could boost your annual salary by $10,000, but it costs $2,000 up front. Without savings, that's impossible. But with this money sitting in your account, it becomes an obvious investment. Or maybe a friend is starting a business and looking for a small investor. Without savings, all you can do is wish them luck. With $10,000, you actually have the option to be part of something that could change your financial future. I'm not telling you to dump your entire emergency fund into your friend's risky venture. I'm just saying that having options feels completely different from having none. This psychological effect goes far beyond money decisions. When you have savings, you sleep better. And I mean this literally. Studies show that people with an emergency fund report noticeably better sleep than people without one. Financial stress is one of the leading causes of insomnia, and removing that stress gives you an immediate health benefit.
Your relationships improve too, since money stress is one of the biggest causes of divorce and family conflict. When you're not constantly worrying about bills, you have more emotional energy left for the people you care about. You become less irritable, less anxious, and more present when you're with them. Having money in the bank changes how you walk into a job interview. When you know you don't desperately need the job, you're far more likely to negotiate your salary and benefits. That confidence usually leads to better job offers and higher pay, which creates a positive loop that speeds up your progress even more.
Now, let's talk about the real issue. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, $10,000 can feel like an impossible number. Here's the good news. You don't have to save it all at once. In fact, trying to save too aggressively usually backfires because it's not sustainable long term. The most successful savers I know started with tiny amounts, $50 a month, sometimes just $25. The key here isn't the amount, it's consistency. Once you build the habit of saving, you can gradually increase the amount as your income grows or as you cut expenses. Here's a fact that might motivate you. The average person spends over $3,000 a year on coffee, eating out, and small daily purchases. That's not even counting car payments or subscriptions. If you redirected just 1/3 of that spending into savings, you'd hit $10,000 in under 3 years. I'm not telling you to give up coffee or never eat out again. I'm telling you that most people have more flexibility in their budget than they realize. The real difference between people who save and people who don't usually isn't income. It's awareness and intention. The impact of $10,000 goes far beyond the immediate security it gives you. It changes how you see risk, how you approach opportunities, and how you plan your future. Most importantly, it proves to you that you can actually reach a financial goal. That proof builds momentum for even bigger wins down the road. Once you save your first $10,000, you start thinking differently about the next $10,000 and then the one after that. Before you know it, you're walking a real path toward financial freedom. Not because of luck or inheritance, but because you built the habits and mindset that make wealth almost inevitable. Now, let's talk about something called decision fatigue. It sounds like corporate nonsense, but it's a real thing. Every single day, you make thousands of tiny money decisions. Should you buy the generic pasta or the name brand?
Should you eat out for lunch or bring a sandwich from home? Should you fill up with regular gas or pay extra for premium? Each of these tiny decisions burns a little bit of mental energy. By the end of the day, you're exhausted from constantly calculating what you can and can't afford. But once you have $10,000 in the bank, 90% of these daily decisions suddenly stop mattering. You choose between generic and name brand based on what you actually like, not based on fear for your bank account. It sounds small, but imagine how much mental energy you'd free up if you stopped doing survival math 50 times a day. I know someone who told me they almost cried the first time they walked into a grocery store after hitting $10,000 in savings. Not because they suddenly went wild buying caviar and champagne. It was because they realized for the first time they were choosing food based on what they wanted, not on what they could afford. That's a level of freedom most people never even notice they're missing until they actually feel it.
Now, let's be real about something. Having $10,000 saved doesn't make you rich. You can't quit your job and become a professional beach volleyball player. You'll still think twice before buying a $1,000 gadget you don't really need. But what it gives you is breathing room. And breathing room is the foundation of every good financial decision. When you're not gasping for financial air, you can actually think strategically instead of just reacting to whatever crisis shows up next.
Maybe your car insurance is up for renewal, and instead of accepting the first offer, you have time to shop around for a better rate. Maybe you realize your phone plan is way too expensive, and you switch to something cheaper without stressing over the fee. These changes might only save you $50 or $100 a month, but when you're not stressed about money, you're far more likely to actually notice these opportunities. And those small savings stack up over time into something big enough to make your next goal even easier to reach. Here's another truth about human psychology. When you have zero savings, every single dollar feels incredibly precious because losing it feels like one step closer to disaster. But once you have $10,000 saved, individual dollars start to feel less precious. Strangely enough, this actually makes you more willing to spend on things that could grow your future income. Someone with no savings will skip a $50 networking event because $50 feels huge when you're living paycheck to paycheck. But someone with $10,000 saved might go to that same event and meet a person who offers them a job paying $5,000 more per year. This safety net doesn't make you careless with money. It makes you more willing to invest in real opportunities. I've watched this play out again and again. People who build their first serious savings often experience a sudden jump in their career. Not because money directly leads to a promotion, but because financial security gives them the courage to take risks a broke person simply can't afford. There's one more thing personal finance articles never talk about, even though everyone experiences it in real life. That's the social side of money. When you're constantly stressed about your finances, it quietly affects how you interact with other people. You might avoid social situations you can't afford, or feel embarrassed about your money struggles, pull away from people. You might even start resenting friends who seem more financially stable than you. So here it is. $10,000 isn't just a number sitting in your bank account. It's a full transformation that touches every corner of your life, from sleeping better to walking into interviews with real confidence. This one milestone creates a domino effect that most people never see coming. If your current bank balance looks embarrassingly small right now, don't panic. Start small, stay consistent, and remember this. The person you become while saving your first $10,000 is worth far more than the money itself. Money comes and money goes, but the identity of being someone who saves stays with you forever. And I'll tell you the biggest truth I've learned, both from the stock market and from life. What separates winners from losers is never luck. It's patience and consistency. So take one small step today and come back to thank me
in 6 months.